This week, Edwin gets down to the nitty-gritty on what it takes to be successful in flipping matted vegetation. It's this week's In Depth. Then, seeing the lake from the air can give you a definite advantage in finding fish. Rick Clunn explains in today's Art of Angling. First up, Kevin Van Dam shows you how effective a straight-tail worm can be Texas rig in this week's episode of Fishing in 4.
A nice one too. Yeah. He just barely pecked it. That's the great thing I love about this rig is bass that even are not that aggressive will come up there and just eat. When you're fishing like this, you're making really long casts, so you really got to have the right equipment. I always like a long rod, a 7-foot 4-action rod. I've got a medium heavy right now and I'm throwing it with 17-pound fluorocarbon line. Always fluorocarbon though for this. It gives it that good sink rate. Let's get him back in there. And most importantly, the fluorocarbon really gives me the feel that I need. I can make a real long cast out there. I've got this long rod, so if I do get a bite, I can move a lot of line and get a good hook set, but I can really feel what that bait's doing. You know, with a light sinker on the nose, it just kind of hops and it darts as it falls. You know, any of these straight tail baits like that, you don't think they'd have a lot of action, but they really do. It's a finesse technique that you can really cover a lot of water with. I'm really hopping it real high. It gives it a really erratic fall. I'm just using a 3/0 Mustad Ultra Lock hook. It's got a real sharp bend on there, and it really holds that bait on real well. You know, 1/4 ounce tungsten XPS bullet weight. It's not pegged, it's free to slide on that line. That way it'll fall down through the cover real well. And it's really important to get this bait rigged perfectly straight. So I'm just gonna put about 1/4 inch of the head onto the hook. And then when I slide that up over that Ultra Lock hook, you can see it really holds it in place really well. And then I'm just going to lay the hook on there to make sure that it goes right through where it needs to be perfectly straight. And I like to run it all the way through and then just skin hook it back in there. Now she's ready to go. Bite is usually real subtle with this. That's the neat thing about it is, you know, I can really move that rod a long ways, and I'm really hopping it a long ways. It's not a fast technique, it's not a great way to cover a lot of water, but if you've got a spot that you've caught a few bass on, and especially if there's some cover out there, some grass, a little bit of brush piles, anything like that, it really works really well. If these fish, they eat it even when they're not hungry. That's what I really like about it. I mean, they just can't take the action of these straight-tail baits. He just came up there and hammered it too. He was right in the top of a tree. I kind of hopped that worm over the top. He just couldn't handle it. Yeah, look at that one right there. You know, people think that finesse worms just catch little fish. There's proof positive right there that you can catch everything on it. There's big ones there. It's gonna be a great bait. Wow, that's a chunk right there. He's a fat one. You know, the thing about it is usually I use natural colors. Even in this conditions right here, I can only see down about 2 feet or so. A green pumpkin red, especially if there's a little color, I like, you know, a little red flake in there, that'll really make that bait visible down there to them. You know, if the water's real dirty, and don't be afraid to throw this in real dirty water, put a June bug on, something dark colored. But mostly natural colors, the clearer the water, you know, you want to go to the watermelons, watermelon candy, things like that. Natural colors that blend with the surroundings. There she goes.
When fishing matted vegetation, you have to learn how to get through to the fish. Edwin shows us how in this week's In Depth.
This is one of my most favorite ways to fish what we're gonna go do today. We're gonna flip mats. We're gonna fish really heavy cover, 65-pound braid, a 7.5 foot, medium heavy, really stiff rod, and punch mats, really thick stuff. We're gonna have to winch those fish out of there, have a hard time getting them out. Just a fun way to fish. It's just master fishing in my opinion. Trying to make a hole there. I need him to wiggle. There he did. Oh, come here, buddy. Come here. Come on. This is some thick stuff I'm fishing, guys. Golly, I can't reach him. I got up there all I can get up there. Whew. All that work for that little fish. That fish was all the way down on the bottom. Man, that is some thick, thick stuff. He got his way right back down through there. I can't begin to describe to you how thick that is. You'd have thought I had a 10-pounder as hard as it was to get that fish in. You know, I'm fishing braid, 65-pound braid, and something to remember when you're flipping these really heavy mats is, you know, that moment of truth is when you get that fish to the top right there, and I pulled absolutely as hard as I could to try to get him to come through, but he wouldn't. And you don't really want to pull. You try to, once you bring him up to the top of that mat, go in there after him. You know, if you keep on pulling and try to yank that fish out of there, a lot of times you're going to straighten your hook, pull the hook out of that fish's mouth. Something's going to happen, that fish is going to get off. So when I get them pinned to the top of that mat, go in after them. I don't care how hard it is to get in there. You don't ever really know how big it is. That could have been a 5 or 6, 7-pounder. You just don't know because they're so bound up in that tight stuff they can't even really fight. So go in after them. You'll land a whole bunch more of them if you do. You know, mat fishing is one of those things that's just not limited to only the summertime. It's one of those things that in the wintertime, they radiate heat into the water. It'll be a warmer area. And in the summertime, it's just the opposite. It's a cooler area, it's a shaded area. It's a thing that I do year round a lot of times, either in the spring, you know, early spring, or all the way in the summertime. You know, a mistake I see a lot of people make when they come to a lake and they're trying to find fish and they're fishing this grass is they fish it way too slow. You know, they sit there and they try to hit every little pocket or every little clump or just every few feet. You know, they're pitching their bait and not knowing yet where the fish are. Fish and grass are gonna group up. So if I'm covering water and flipping every 10, 15, 20 feet, you know, as I'm going down through here, I'm gonna get a bite here eventually, and it's gonna be a group of fish. There's just way too much water to sit here and make a flip every 2 foot, you know, in this grass. You just can't do that and cover water effectively to find fish. Cover it fast until you start getting some bites, and then when you get bites, turn back around and go through those areas. Come on out of there, girl. Come on. Come on. Stick that head. Man, come out of there, fish. Come on. Come on. Yeah, there she is right there. Man, I got her out of there. That's a long and lean fish right there. Buddy. You know, something very important to keep in mind when you're flipping mats. When you go to set the hook, don't throw slack in your line. Now think about this for a second. I'm fishing basically here 15 foot of water. And that fish, I just had a bite. All you want to do is just reel your line tight and pull back. You know, when I say throw slack to your line, you know, a lot of times if you're worm fishing or something, you know, you get a bite and you'll drop your rod and then you'll come back and you'll set the hook. What happens with a big weight, I'm using an 1.5 ounce weight, when you go to drop slack to that line, that fish is going to feel that weight. So it's very, very important never to give slack to that fish. And it's not a big, you know, come out of your shoes type of hook set. It's a hook set where you just line tight and you're pulling back. You don't want that fish to feel that weight. You don't want to have it. I just tell you, you're going to land 10 times more fish if you do that instead of throwing slack to them. Very, very important. How I choose the areas that I'm keying in on is I'm trying to find different areas. Like right here, I've got a little indention, I've got a tree and a point. I mean, it's different. It's something different and a very, very hard edge. I don't have any grass under the boat right now. If you can imagine, it's just a straight wall, 15-foot straight wall all the way to the bottom in this big mat. The grass is gonna grow in the same depth all the way around the lake. It's almost like a contour line. You can look at this grass and you can just tell that's the 15-foot contour line. So keep that in mind and try to, you know, focus in on where your bites are coming from, you know, whether it be on the points or in the guts or maybe in the back of a gut with the isolated tree like what we got right here. Really pay attention to that grass line because it's gonna tell you those subtle differences in the depth change and where you're gonna need to key in to get your bites.
Did you folks know that the old adage that grass means bass is really true? You know, most any body of water that has aquatic vegetation probably has a pretty good population of bass. And aquatic vegetation is not really that hard to fish. It just takes time and perseverance and learning the techniques that work best. It can be very exciting at times.
You know, not so much today, but I have seen times you'll have these mats like this, and then right here I've got this green stuff. A lot of times on the trail we call it cheese, and then you've got brown cheese over here. And I've seen times when they'd only be in this stuff right here, or they'd only be in that brown stuff right there, or maybe a spot where the brown cheese and the green cheese is all mixed together. And pay attention to those differences, because there's gonna be times when you're out here and you're mat fishing, and those are the only mats right there with the brown stuff that you're gonna get bit on, or these with the green stuff is the only ones you're gonna get bit on. You've got to pay attention to those, and if you see them, don't pass one up. You know, flip it, figure out which mat or what kinds of mats the fish are relating to. Come on, girl, come out of there. Come on, come on. I got one. Oh, it's a good one too. Not as big as I was thinking it was. Come here. Oh man, it's a nice fish. Ooh, that hook just came right out. Just came out. It really makes a lot of sense why I'm catching these fish where I'm catching them. This hydrilla, it grows up in a stalk and then it just blooms out and makes this big canopy, almost like an umbrella. And those fish feel really secure. It's great ambush points for them. And also the hydrilla, you know, it gives off oxygen. Anytime the sun's shining, it's the optimal place for a bass to live is in this hydrilla. You know, a mistake I make sometimes, I get too anxious and it'll cost you when you're flipping mats. You want to try to make your presentations close. And the reason is, it's hard enough to get a fish out of this stuff when you're close, but if I'm making a real long presentation, you know, getting in a hurry, it's even harder and you don't get a good hook set. So try to keep your presentations close to your boat to where you'll get a good hook set and have a better opportunity to get those fish out. Oh, there's one right there. Golly, I got it. Oh, come here, girl. Come here. That's not a big one, but it's a fish. Oh. Not a big one, but man, that fish hit it about the fourth hop that I hopped that thing up. Getting out here close to that point. Man, that's fun. You just don't ever know when it's gonna be a giant. Very important to watch your line. You've got to be paying attention. You can't be taking a nap. You know, a lot of your bites will happen on the initial fall, and all that'll happen is that your line will stop. Or maybe your line might speed up just a smidgen faster than it was falling. and that's a bite. And if you go and you're not paying attention and you check that fish or you hop it all, hop it, that fish is gonna spit it out. So really pay attention to what's going on so you can detect those bites. Oh, Lee, this might be a good one. Come here, girl. Come out of there. Come out of there. Come on, stay on there. Stay on there. Oh, there's a good one right there, guys. Golly. Man, that's why you don't yank them out of the grass. I got a little excited. Earlier I was talking to you, go get them. That's what I should have done there. Man, golly. Basically what I was using today, I had 1.5 ounces, that's a Bass Pro XPS tungsten weight, big master weight, a 5/0 straight shank hook, very, very important straight shank. You hook fish a lot better with a straight shank. The baits I was using a Yum woolly bug, just a great bait, I catch a lot of fish on that bait right there, and then a Yum hog crawl. I actually ran out of these baits, is why I went to these. It really doesn't matter, just the size of the bait, something compact, something that you can get through the mat. You don't want to try getting a big bait with lots of appendages on it. It just won't go through that stuff. So I like a compact bait and a really heavy weight. That was my setup. That was what I was fishing, catching those fish underneath those mats.
Do you want to be a better and more efficient fisherman? Rent an airplane. Why would you do that? Rick Clunt explains all in today's Art of Angling.
Yeah, back in the mid-'70s, Gary Klein and myself were fishing the BASS tournament on Albemarle Sound, North Carolina, a humongous body of water. In fact, it was intimidating, and so that's where we first came up with the idea of renting a small airplane and flying this thing before we actually went out on it in a boat. And that's really what we're going to talk about today is aerial observation of the lake and how valuable it is in your fishing. One of the major concerns anytime I mention the concept of aerial observation, in other words, renting a small airplane to fly a lake, is they're afraid of the cost of it. And the reality is it's not that expensive, especially if you and a buddy rent like a 2-passenger airplane. It runs anywhere from, $80 an hour to $160 an hour. And I know that's not cheap, but at the same time, when you think about the amount of gas that you'd have to spend in your boat and vehicle to see this same large lake, then really it's quite economical. What do you look for when you're flying in an airplane? Here's the real key, and it took me a while to look for it. The first thing I look for when I get up in the air is I look for a cow. I'm looking from the air. We're usually flying maybe 1,000 feet or so, and I'm looking for a cow, a car, anything that I get a frame of reference on. If I'm looking at some lily pads down there, or if I'm looking at something in the water I don't know the size of, now I've got a frame of reference. And so that's the first thing I do. Secondly, I have my lake map with me. And I really try to go into what I call a pure observation mode, no judgment. Well, I want to fish there, that looks good, that blah. I simply want to write down everything I can that's in the water that I think habitat that will hold fish. Boat docks, lily pads, riprap, broken rock, standing timber, off-color water, and you can sometimes even see submerged vegetation. So I'm writing this all down, and I'm not trying to decide whether that's where I'm going to fish or not going to fish. Where you decide that is once you get on the water, and once I get on the water, then I start practicing for, let's say, a day. I'm looking for the fish, and maybe I've worked boat docks and I've worked riprap, and all of a sudden I move over in these lily pads, and boom, I catch some fish. Well, now here's where this flight becomes invaluable. I have the tool that shows me wherever a lily pad in the lake is, where before it was always the unknown on a brand new lake that got in your way. What's around the next point? I wonder what's in that pocket. Did I miss something over here? Well, now I've got it all in front of me because I wrote it all down. Well, now I know. I just pull my map out. Okay, there are lily pads in this cove, lily pads in this cove, and lily pads in this pocket. So instantly I have the information I need. So there's where flying becomes invaluable. Nowadays, we've even got some other tools. You've got to start looking at the satellite mapping sites you have, like Google Earth, which you can go on and really get a pretty good idea of what a lake looks like. But you do have to take in consideration that whether these things are current. That's the one thing about flying. You're dealing with exact current conditions when you're flying, where with the Google Earth, you got to kind of have to be careful there whether you're dealing with current information.